Hello everyone, welcome to Cosmic Rush. My name is Priscilla and today I wanted to talk about the art of simplicity and how to create a simply designed island. So let's get started. As you can see here, I'm on a slumber island and I'm trying to recreate a winter prairie field. I thought I would lean into the idea of simplicity by creating wide open fields, and winter is the perfect season to also emphasize this, as I feel winter is great in kind of emulating stillness, calm, quiet, and simple. So as you can see here, you know how I like to start off my designs, and that is figuring out the structure of the island, figuring out the placement of buildings, in this case my home, and of course the pathways. I cannot emphasize how much I love pathways and how essential and important pathways are, and trying to figure out the accessibility of different parts of your island. I feel that pathways is very underrated and kind of an afterthought when it comes to designing an island. I think especially for someone who is using their island to play on, pathways is super essential, super important as far as getting your dailies done and, just being an efficient player on your island to get things done. So I highly suggest when designing your island to know what your pathways are, and that's kind of just what you figure out as you continue to play more and more on your island. So it's something you'll always tweak and adjust, and like I said, as you play more, you'll find more efficient routes to get to certain parts of your island. You'll find different exits and entrances of your different builds to help you move around your island. So definitely do not sleep on pathways, whether that be in-game pathing or custom paths. Use them. And I think that also adds to figuring out how to create a simple island as well, because if you are someone who suffers from decision fatigue and is someone who is not particularly interested in the design aspect of Animal Crossing, then leaning into a simple designed island is probably the way to go. It's not a design style for everyone. Creating a simple, minimal island can show a lot of restraint and can often be more difficult design because we often equate simplicity with emptiness, and at worst it can feel a little awkward when something is designed super minimally if you're not considering what it means to have a simple design. So what do I mean by that? What does it mean to have a simple design? And for some people, simplicity think it's just about a lack of items, that if you don't put a lot of items down, if you don't create a lot of builds, then your island will be simple. And I would try to reframe simplicity as not necessarily a lack of items, but the cause of highlighting or wanting to make a particular item or build stand out. And I think that what makes a simple designed island from awkward to really simple and minimal is when you want to highlight or emphasize a particular build. And you can create this focal point a few different ways. You can create this through scale, aka the size of your build, whether that be the dimensions of the build itself or by height, and using items that complement rather than overwhelm or distract from it. But most times you can create this focal point or build stand out by what items aren't placed around it. So that's kind of where you get the lack of items. And why using a lack of items will usually give more impact to what is already there. So the less you include, the more presence each remaining item has. Each item will have more intentionality behind it and will provide more presence, especially if it's kind of the only thing there. And so, as you can see here, I am now working on fencing and placing down trees. I think another thing to consider if you want to design a simple island is just really lean into the landscaping of it all. I think if you don't want to create very many builds or don't have that many items yet, I think working on the landscaping is just as fun, just as challenging, to create different focal points as well. And you can really lead the player and your eye towards particular builds just through the landscaping. And I think trees and fencing should be worked early on in your design build because they can add a lot of height, specifically the trees. Same with the fencing. The fencing really acts to encapsulate a certain build and really kind of captures and contain a build in a particular area and really moves your eye towards a particular place. And as you can see here, I'm placing quite a few ducks around the pond, weeds, wheat fields, again leaning into the natural landscape of a prairie field. Again, the ducks are part of the natural environment and something that complements the area as well. So using items that lean into the theme or build will help add to the cohesion of the design as well. Next, I'm kind of working behind my home here. Some of the things I use as inspiration for this winter prairie field is paintings and IRL photos. And what I noticed a lot in these inspo illustrations and paintings is vast open prairie field lined with fencing along an empty road and a home and some forest and landscaping far into the distance. And so I'm trying to recreate kind of that distant forest here. I'm designing on a medium-sized island as well, and I think if I worked on the large-size island, these elements would have emphasized that even more, that vastness of the prairie fields and that isolation you get from living in such a rural place. So next, you could see I am creating a small focal point here with a shed build using these retro transportation seating areas and complementing it with these trash bins and garbage bags and some wheat fields. So this is another focal point I wanted to emphasize, is this little shed build here. And as far as builds are concerned on your island, like I said, you can really create focal points by using the size, and whether that be a small build like that shed I have kind of in the distance there, or you can really create a very large build as well, whether that be a large meadow or a large farm area or a large or just anything that takes up a large amount of space, because you are using cohesive items to emphasize this particular build. It'll create that much of an impact and focal point on your island. So when it comes to simple design, don't think about a lack of items. You can create simplicity even with very large scale builds. And I love large scale builds. Sometimes when I play and design on my island, I feel the size island that we have isn't that big. I think I have quite a few really large builds with that meadow build I have where my home is. The farm also on my main island takes quite a bit of space, and the really large rainbow flower field, now kind of prairie field, I'm using the slumber island kind of as a test build for that area as well. And I feel like the island is not big enough. And that's because I love creating really large builds. And even though the size itself is very large, I think I still consider it simple because there are elements and items that really emphasize that particular build. I think if you were to create like 10 mini builds in a very small amount of space, it can feel really messy and crowded. But if you have a small build in one particular area or a very large build that takes up quite amount of space, I think that can be considered simple as well. So I think when it comes to, in contrast, a very busy or overly designed island, if your eyes kind of just glaze over the entire build in its entirety, you could probably say there's no focal point in that particular build, and there's no kind of rest for your eyes to land on. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's definitely a style. A maximalist kind of island is definitely a style and definitely a way of designing an island. But if you are looking for something that is, again, more easy to traverse and walk and access, definitely consider a more simple designed island. And you don't have to have a lot of builds. You can just have like a few very large builds and a few very small builds and call it a day. And I think that'll work just as well. And if you want to go super, super minimal, I highly suggest, one, of course, figuring out your pathways and where you can traverse your island. Like I said, the different entrance and exits to go, to different parts of your island, and just work on the landscaping. I feel like this particular build that really leans into the trees, bushes, fencing, and a few items still kind of works, and I really, really like it. If I were to go for an all natural, nature focused build, this would be so so cozy to play in and log into, and I would be just as happy to design. So definitely do not underestimate good landscaping. And if you're waiting for a particular item or DIY so you can create the build that you want, I think leaving the environment or area just as nature focused and just with trees and weeds and flowers, I think it works just as well. And I think it's just maintaining, I think the flowers can get out of hand, so just being on top of the flowers and the weed situation will definitely help, but definitely don't feel pressure to fill up space just because. So if you're looking for a simple design island, just, you know, let nature as is. Another inspiration I love for Simply Design Island is how Animal Crossing designed their islands, especially in the opening sequence when you restart your island or start your island. I love looking at that opening animation sequence as inspiration. It looks so idyllic and natural and simple, and I kind of look to that as inspiration as well. So I think Animal Crossing and their way of designing islands is a great reference point as well. As far as what I'm doing currently, I am recreating kind of this small forest cluster that I often see when I, drive on the highways in very rural areas where there's a lot of open prairie field. I think I'm very used to the sight of emptiness and stillness and quietness when it comes to prairies because, I live in a prairie province, so this is very familiar to me. But for others, it can feel very open, wide, empty. But I think that just really leans into the theme of this build in particular. So again, using the same items to complement and emphasize the environment of this winter prairie field. I think weeds are an awesome design element to create that lived in overgrown look. So if you are working on landscaping, go to Captain's Islands and gather all those weeds to use on your island. That's what I do. Sometimes I'm out of weeds because I love placing them in. So next here, I wanted to create a small cliff area. Some of the design inspo that I found on Pinterest really emphasize rolling prairie fields, and you kind of can't really get that on the island. The perspective itself as you traverse through the island, as you move forward, kind of shows the curvature of the land itself, but you can't really create hills on the island. So, and I think cliffs are a bit harsh for what I'm trying or what I'm trying to achieve, but I thought it would create, again, another focal point and some dimension to the island by creating this cliff area here, kind of a mini hill, if you will. So again, this is just going to be a landscaped, terraformed island with a few trees and some weeds and a couple bushes. So very minimal, very simple, I think. And yeah, so I really wanted to emphasize the very long empty road that leads up to the home. So I did that with some electrical poles and, like I said, some fencing that you will see later on in the video. But mostly this build is just about landscaping and keeping it natural. Again, not really filling each space with some build or item. I think when it comes to finding inspiration for builds or for your island, I highly suggest IRL photos. I think the inspo we see from other decorators and creators can lean more on the maximalist side, so there might not be a lot of reference points of a simple designed island. So I highly suggest looking to IRL things you're familiar with and know, whether that be in your own community where you live or just some IRL photos of certain places or builds, I think is great inspiration, and taking certain elements of that particular inspiration and making it your own. So as you can see here, I think I'm done. I think I've placed all the trees I wanted, really emphasize someone living here by the chopped wood and the garbage. I love all the kind of mundane items that people use. Oh yes, and here I'm trying to create a small farm kind of plot area. And again, to lean into it, I won't have any crops or anything because nothing is growing in the winter time, at least during this time. So, but to emphasize that this is where crops will be planted and grown, I thought is a nice little texture focal area. And again, using fencing to create boundaries and a sense of a particular build is great. Here we go. This is it. This is what I came up with. I think overall pretty simple to me. And kind of last set of touches here. We love good log bench. And I love the little rabbit items as well. But yeah, that is everything. For me, simplicity makes an island feel livable. It leaves room to breathe and room to imagine yourself there. So let me know in the comments below, what does simplicity look like on your island?